Hi and welcome back to Chef Hacker Kitchen. Today we're going to be hacking an ancient dessert. How ancient? Well, it's at least 1200 years old. This is holiday eggnog bread pudding. Okay, we're going to start, of course, with white bread. It should be stale white bread, like this one. But don't worry if you don't have stale white bread. I'm going to show you two ways to get it. We're going to use 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, half of a teaspoon of baking powder, 3 eggs, 1 stick of butter, that's a half cup. The hack ingredient, instead of milk, we're going to use 3 cups of eggnog, store-bought or homemade. And we're going to use a sprinkling of nutmeg on top. It's optional. That's the spice for eggnog. If you're a little bit squeamish about that, you can always use cinnamon. And depending on how sweet your eggnog is or how sweet you like your dessert to be, you can add up to 1/4 cup of additional white sugar. Let's get started. So if you have stale bread, then you're fine, you're good to go. But what if you don't? Well, there's 2 ways you can handle it. If you're sort of the planning type who knows what you're going to make in a few days, then all you need to do is take your slices of bread and lay them on a cookie sheet and let them rest on a counter until they get dry and crisp. If you can't wait, you can still put them on a tray and then put them into an oven at 220 degrees for 30 to 45 minutes so that they get crispy, but they don't get any color. So let's do that. Into a 220 degree oven, set the timer. Okay, so while the bread is preparing, I like to take a paper towel, pull off some of the butter, and then use that to butter the bottom and sides of the baking dish. This is going to let the outside of the pudding get nice and brown, and it's also going to prevent any excessive sticking. Okay, now we're going to melt the remainder of the butter. All right, we don't need to let this go the whole way. Okay, so I put it, I checked it at 30 minutes and it was not quite dry enough for my liking, so I put it in another 5 minutes and that's fine. Now I'm going to set the oven to our bake temperature of 350. Now I'll take the bread. Okay. I like to put them in about 1-inch squares. Now they'll tend to crumble depending on how dried out it is. But the first time I made this was during the golden age of pompous dining. It was in a sort of a high-end restaurant. We had a guy come in to make it especially for them. This was regular bread pudding. And he told me that the staler the bread is, the better the pudding comes out. And he's not exactly wrong. So you like it to be nice and crisp. It saves the body of the bread so you don't get a mushy product at the end. All right, so now we're ready to blend our ingredients. We're going to transfer our bread to our greased baking dish. And we're going to start the mixing. This is where you really can see just how easy this recipe is. Bread pudding in general is an easy recipe, but when you use the eggnog, it gets even more easy. So the first thing we're going to do is going to whip the eggs until they are uniformly yellow. Then we're going to add our dry ingredients. We have the baking powder and the cornstarch. Going to give it a nice thick pudding texture once it's cooked. Now you do have to make sure that the cornstarch is evenly distributed, or as evenly distributed as possible. It'll be a little bit thick in the eggs, but when you add the butter and then the eggnog, it'll do nicely. Okay, so now we're going to drizzle in the butter and blend it. I sometimes leave a little bit of butter, like maybe about that much, and I just drizzle that on the top of the pudding before it goes into the oven. I think it helps give it a nice brown color, which I really love. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now we're going to put in our eggnog. Okay, and it has that nice, rich vanilla nutmeg smell. Okay, and we just pour that over the bread, and I try to, the goal is to get the bread evenly saturated, because what will happen is the bread will soak up the milk anywhere it's touching, and then it'll swell up. When it cooks, the baking powder will help it rise, and the cornstarch and the egg will help it stay, and you'll avoid this issue that you sometimes get with baked goods where they rise really nicely, but then as they cool, they sort of flatten out. We don't want that. We want this to be nice and somewhat light. I wouldn't call it really light. It's certainly not a souffle, but we want a little bit of body so that it doesn't flatten out. And then I move around the bread so that it is uniformly distributed in the pan. And some of the bread cubes will float to the top of the surface, and those are really going to get nice and brown. So you kind of want that. You don't want everything to be flat. Okay, and then as I said, I'll take this little bit of melted butter, which there's a lot of the milk solids in the bottom, so they're going to brown up nice, and I'll just kind of drizzle that on the top. This goes into a 350-degree oven for 40 or 45 minutes, or until a toothpick in the center comes out clean. Okay, here we go. Timer for 40 minutes. All right. It's been 40 minutes. Let's check. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Looks a little loose, actually. Maybe could go another 5. Let's check with a toothpick in the center. No, it's not quite done yet. We're going to go 5 more minutes on that. Okay, let's see what we got. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Yeah, good. Okay, so a few tips. One thing to look for: if you shake the pudding and the center looks a little bit loose and jiggly, then you probably should leave it in the oven a little more for a little more time. What you want is, right now it's nice and puffy and light, and if you don't cook it all the way through, it's really going to sink as it cools. Another tip would be, if you make this and it does sink, what you might want to try doing is turning it off and leaving it in the oven for a few minutes so that the temperature drops really slowly, and that could prevent it from sinking as well. But we're going to top it off. This is a little bit, makes some people a little bit uncomfortable. This is nutmeg, and it really is the spice that is indicative of eggnog. So I use that. You could also, if you're not that adventurous, you could also use cinnamon on top. Okay. So there you have it. holiday eggnog bread pudding, a ancient classic hacked with the addition of eggnog. Go ahead and make this. I think you're going to love it. It'll be great if you want to bring it to a holiday party, or if you can get eggnog any other time during the year, go ahead and do it. If you like this video, please go ahead and like this video, and if you want to see all the new stuff coming out of Chef Hacker Kitchen, go ahead and subscribe. See you next time in Chef Hacker's Kitchen.